All right, and we are live. Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty Live. I'm your host, Liberty Down Under, and with me today, I've got two Brits on to talk about how COVID's been over there for them with lockdowns and restrictions. So I've got Lady Alice and Julie to be
Hey,
on. Say hi, guys.
hey guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So what I thought we'd do is we just start and run me down how COVID restrictions are like right now, as it stands in September of 2021, with regards to COVID. So what do they have in place right now with regards to restrictions?
Shall I go first, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
So things are quite tame at the moment. Things are not too overtly bad. So there's not a whole lot of mask mandates, people are wearing them in public, but there's not a massive expectation for them. The main thing that I personally see is the vaccine conditionality for international travel. That's sort of the main thing that I see as physically affecting me right now. But another thing which is not related to like laws and law enforcement and government is just the culture. And the culture, people haven't given enough attention to the culture as much as they have, the law and the law enforcement, because the two things are very, that they have their own ways of being very forceful. Even though culture is not physically forceful, man is a social animal, and we are governed by social custom as much as the law of the land. And particularly regarding to vaccines, that has just been the culture has just been very, very bizarre and very ferocious. Like, I was at work the other day, and I accidentally answered truthfully when someone asked, "Are you vaxxed?" And I said no, and I just said no. I hadn't talked about it, given literally everybody else that was sitting in desks near me was just aghast that I had not been vaxxed yet. I was just, and I was so taken. I didn't know what to say. It was probably the exact same mindset, I think, than if we lived in the United States during one of their great Christian awakenings and someone had said they've not been baptized. I think it's extremely analogous to that. And I'm not saying that to disparage Christianity. I'm saying that as it's the same mindset. It is a religious mindset. It's not a mindset of following the science. It is a religious mindset. And that has been, the culture is just the thing that's been far more kind of woeful for me than just the law of the land at the moment in September. At the moment, yeah, definitely.
But there is no mandate, correct? Though there is no vaccine mandate.
So I have not noticed any mandates for, say, going into pubs or doing most public things. I haven't experienced that yet. It might come, might not. I don't know. There's certainly a lot of there is polarizing opinion on it, but it's I think the future is bleak, but there's nothing yet on that domestic public, access to things. There's nothing yet. No.
Yeah.
But it could come. I mean, there's talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Anything could happen.
Because last time.
This government always denies that, saying we're not going to do that, or it's under review. It's like when they flip flop and U-turn so often, it gives no confidence to those words. They've gone back on their word on COVID measures loads of times. It's just doesn't. I don't trust them for anything. No one does.
Nope. Lots of people do. Sorry, lots of people do still trust them, or
fools, yeah.
Or there are these usual people that are very anti-conservative. I mean, imagine it's somewhere in Australia where people are very anti the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party, I guess. But the Conservative Party in Australia is different from the British one, and it's more analogous to the Liberal Party. There are just these groups of people that are just just anti-Conservative Party all the time, but then they will get angry at the Conservatives now for not locking down hard enough, not governing them hard enough. That's basically, it's really strange. If you think particular government
thing here.
if you
Yeah,
think
but-
particularly government actors are evil, you don't call for them to have more power, do you? I mean, it's a bit
Exactly.
contradictory.
It's like giving me harder meme.
Giving me
harder
harder.
daddy
Yeah,
meme.
it's
Give me
so
harder day, yeah.
it's
Literally.
very strange, and these people probably have lots of self-esteem issues. I don't know, but it's basically that, and yeah, and like even on the climate change stuff, which I think there's a lot to be said with the overlap of the climate change stuff, whether it's government policy regarding it or the culture that calls for it, stuff to do with climate change. There's a lot of overlap between that issue and COVID, and that's just the same thing. Like Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, they are going full on with loads of green policy, and everyone
Watermelon
just
horses, yeah.
and yeah, and everyone just says, still just says, oh, they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough. It's just like, goodness sake, look what they're actually doing.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
it's awful.
ridiculous.
There's a lot of overlap there with climate change and COVID, so that, I'll stick to
Yeah.
COVID for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard a story at one point that you guys had apparently ruled out vaccine mandates for the rest of this year. Was that correct?
I think so.
There are lots of reports in the media about, being ruled out, and then some policy will just arbitrarily come along, which is the opposite of what they said. So it's hard to trust anything. And I just think the best thing you can do is just expect the worst and just be vigilant
exactly
for
what
the
I
rest. Just be vigilant all the time. And maybe that's sort of a bit of a cop out or a bit childish. I don't know, but it's just it's difficult to trust these reports of say so about they're going to bring in these mandates or whatever. So, but you should just generally expect not good things. Yeah.
Now you were saying there's a culture about towards having like vaccines being encouraged amongst the people. Is that limited to say the big cities, or is that a nationwide culture?
It's nationwide.
It's less. I mean, I think you wouldn't really go anywhere, and before you'd spoken to someone in a particular area of the UK, you would just expect them to be on board with it. As in, you can't know for sure. You might go to a really rural area of the country. You can't just expect that that people will be less hysterical about it there. Maybe it is more in reality. Maybe it's more likely that more rural areas will be a bit less in tune because they're away from big cities. But you can't really just expect it. No, you kind of have to be quite vigilant, really. Yeah, but it is more pronounced in cities, definitely. Like, because you just see all the posters, all the government posters, all the things. Just cities is most definitely, you can expect it, and you'll most likely be correct.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
So you guys saw elections in Scotland recently, where you had the SNP re-elected with I think it was they gained an extra seat, correct? Or
with an extra seat, but they were still one seat short of a majority. But basically the Green Party, which are a bunch of socialists, but basically socialists. Are also pro-independence. Have formed a coalition with cabinet positions in the SNP government. So now they have a majority to push through more tyranny, like the hate crime bill that they pushed through last term. It's which makes Scotland the most authoritarian part of the UK by far.
Oh yeah. Scotland is just, even before now, there was loads of stuff in Scotland relating to alcohol pricing and just
minimum alcohol prices,
all these things. So Scotland in general had this underlying thing about them where they were going to be more heavy-handed in the government, and COVID was just a thing to push that into overdrive. But Scotland, that's the thing about what's known as devolution, the thing about having the home countries, the different countries giving greater political autonomy. And sometimes you give a place more autonomy and they just run with it, and they double down more. And that, particularly with Scotland, that's a particular case of that. And Yeah, it's really awful what's happening in Scotland in so many
Yeah.
different ways. So many different ways.
Yeah, literally criminalizing dinner table conversations deemed offensive and reported. It's ridiculous.
But they
So yeah,
probably.
what
Sorry, go on.
sorry.
Sorry.
What I was going to ask about the SNP is whether they'd been doing COVID restrictions a lot harsher than
Yes.
say the
Yeah.
Tories have at a federal
Yeah, they
level.
have.
I think they've been more likely
Yeah.
to do the things like, police get a slightest tip off that you've got a visitor at your house, they'll come and break the door down. I think they've been slightly more overboard with that than
Yeah,
the England have. Yeah.
and their restrictions have been stricter and lasted much longer than the rest of the UK. Well, Wales is the exception to that because they're about the same as Scotland for authoritarianism and
Oh yeah, Wales.
and COVID measure. Yeah, a lot of people
A
do
couple-
forget about Wales, but
I think it was around around winter we just had. There were all these pictures of these supermarkets in Wales where they'd put like plastic coverings over certain shelves in the supermarket, things that were not essential. And
Really?
I can't. What sort of things were it? It was like maybe luxury things. I don't know.
Things, and it's like
Things that might be considered luxurious that you buy in supermarkets. They would just put plastic covering over so you couldn't buy them, or something mad. I don't know.
yeah,
Over here in Melbourne, they said to you can only buy 6 beers per day for you can buy a 6-pack of beers. So is that similar to what you guys have had over there in Wales at least?
I don't think we've had specific numbers like that,
no.
but we've had similar madness like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it has ever reached that. Although there was the toilet paper thing very early on. You probably had that in Australia as well,
Yeah.
right?
I think we started that. I think that was our fault, guys. I'm sorry.
It was. It was the Aussies who started
Toilet paper thing. Yeah, it was.
We started it, and then it went to Europe and America.
Yeah, it was because I remember seeing that on the news. It was sort of probably March or April, and then I just went. This was before all the lockdown stuff. I just went down to the supermarket, and all the toilet paper on the shelf had been taken off, and I'm pretty sure that was because they saw what was happening in the news themselves and didn't want a rush on toilet paper. As opposed to there actually being a rush on toilet paper. But yeah, it was mad. It was like a worldwide hysteria.
Yeah, my town was pretty hard hit about it. It was hard to get essentials, and because people were panic buying like a bunch of. Trying to find what's a word that won't get you banned. Stupid. There you go.
For some reason, I never struggled to buy. Like in March, April 2020, I never struggled to buy anything, but specifically toilet paper was this thing that was just missing from loads of shelves. It was so weird. Oh God. Yeah.
I heard that you guys had more tiers to your COVID restrictions in Ireland and Scotland. I heard because I watch a bit of Mock the Week, which is one of your British comedy shows. I used to before it went super woke. But I do occasionally see clips. I do occasionally have clips show up in my YouTube feed. So I heard that they said that it was 4 tiers in England itself, and then you had more tiers in Wales and in Scotland.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it wasn't the case that it wasn't the same thing as like having just more regional autonomy in COVID policy. It was still central diktat saying this part of the country is going to be, more severe than this part of the country because we say so. And, obviously because case numbers change a lot, it's difficult to remain accurate on the tier levels reflecting the case numbers. But
yeah, I'm glad they got rid of that after the last lockdown.
Yeah, that's been away. That hasn't been around for a while. There hasn't been tiers in a while. But it was just, it's the epitome of just central diktat, central planning, central, just basically socialist planning of the economy or whatever it is. Yeah. And I mean, it's just like the war all over again. I mean, this is very similar to the war, although maybe in the war there was slightly more control of government dictating like production numbers of various products. There wasn't anything quite as far-reaching as that, except maybe actual medical equipment, but just loads of general central diktats, central planning, which the conservatives would otherwise consider themselves, against the idea of. It's just, it's just made it clear how easy this sort of thing that politicians can be so tempted by, despite having these convictions against central planning. It's just contradictions and lies.
Now, you've covered Wales and Scotland. What about Northern Ireland? Have they been similar, or where do they sit in all this?
I think they've been a bit more different, because they tend to be a bit more different in lots of ways. They have different parties there.
Yeah.
And there's been more convergence of culture between them and the Republic of Ireland over the years. That's just, has made them more distinct from Britain. I don't actually know off the top of my head specifically how it's gone with COVID in Northern Ireland in terms of that, though. I
think they've been pretty similar to Wales last I heard. It's maybe not as bad as that, but they're just a little bit better than Wales, but not great apparently. Really, I don't. Northern Ireland does its own thing because it's separated by the sea border from the rest of the UK. So it kind of follows that the Republic of Ireland more than the UK does the UK. Kind of just does its own thing rather than following our kind of model. Because really the more it's more unofficially part of the Republic of Ireland, if you know what I mean. It's because of the no border, and there's no border between them because of the troubles. If you know what the
Good Friday Agreement.
Yes.
Good Friday Agreement. Yeah. They have a lot. They kind of work together. If you know what I mean. It makes more sense for them to align with the Republic of Ireland's measures and our measures because of the sea border.
There's been a lot more cultural convergence since the Good Friday Agreement, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So if let's say in theory they're bringing in vaccine mandates to travel, would that then apply to travel to Northern Ireland, or how would that work? How would they? Would there be some sort of domestic bubble that would include Northern Ireland, or would they be separate when it comes to the vaccine mandates to travel?
I don't think it would be like, given that you can have visa-free travel between England and Ireland now, just so that might generally give an indication of, before COVID, you could travel to the Republic of Ireland visa-free. That gives me an indication that generally travel between Ireland and the whole Isle of Ireland and Britain would not be too restricted, probably not on COVID then. So I don't think that's likely to happen. But certainly outside of the British Isles and Ireland, there's essentially vaccine mandates for travel in place right now, except for a few select countries where there's a mandate for a negative test. But most countries in Europe, travel is restricted by vaccination status.
Yeah, and it's the same for the US now because a couple of days ago they lifted the COVID restrictions for us to go there, but we had to, you have to be double vaccinated, or the travel ban's still in place for you, which is a de facto vaccine mandate.
Yeah. Now it's been a theme of a lot of islands to go for COVID zero. We've seen that in Australia and also New Zealand. Is it that same push for COVID zero for good in the UK, or is there more support for living with COVID as the US wants to do, for example? So the US plans to live with COVID, whereas island nations tend to try and get rid of it for good. So is it the same over in the UK as well?
It's more of the living with COVID. There's definitely pressure from a decent amount of officials and some opposition to go fight for COVID zero, but it seems to be the fight to live with it seems to be somewhat winning for now. But But I doubt that'll last. If you know what I mean. I know what this government's like. You can't trust a single word they say.
Based on the rhetoric that's being used by the government now, they're giving off signs that they are pushing for a type of zero COVID strategy, and time will that'll ultimately be proven or not if we get another autumn winter lockdown this winter like last time. That will be when
I'm dreading
that will be whether or not they're definitely saying yes, we want a zero COVID strategy sort of thing, because obviously the results of mass vaccination have been very mixed. There's no absolute clear-cut causal relationship between high vaccination rates and, lower case numbers. That's just not really happening. And either they can just go with what the most accepted science of epidemiology says with infectious diseases, that they become epidemic, as opposed to, trying to just micromanage everybody's actions to make sure they're never in harm's way. But just going back a bit, you said that island nations are more likely to go to zero. Recently, there has been a bit of a buck of that trend. Iceland, the sort of chief epidemiologist of Iceland, recently himself kind of came out with a non-zero COVID strategy, where they have a small population anyway, so it might have been less difficult for them to do mass vaccinations. But I'm pretty sure there was the sort of chief epidemiologist of Iceland, who has an unpronounceable name, of course. He said he basically said, yes, we've just got to live with this. There's no other way about it now. We've done the best we can. And if that's true, that island nations generally have been going for zero COVID, I think Iceland has bucked that trend a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
There could just be more of a Pacific trend then with COVID, as opposed to a worldwide trend. Now, is there much pressure in, say, Northern Ireland and in Wales and Scotland to fight Boris? If Boris says there's no vaccine mandate, would there be pushback from Wales and Scotland on that, or would they go along with it?
I think. Do you want to go first, or?
No, you can go first if you want.
I think it is a bit of an awkward topic for the usual oppositions to the Conservatives. It's a bit of an awkward topic, the idea of vaccine mandates. There have been a few very shy people, I think, in a lot of these opposition parties, whether it's the Labour Party or the independent parties of whatever. I think it's a topic that they're quite awkward on, and I think they wouldn't be so keen to just come out and say, we're going to force everyone to be vaccinated. But at the same time, they would try and do the next best thing, which is just, try and ramp up the cultural element of things, which is to just, because the cultural element of vaccination can just mean a de facto vaccine mandate rather than a de jure one. Whereas if you can say, oh, we're never going to force you to have a vaccine, but we're going to introduce this culture, which just means that you'll be very socially ostracized if you do not have one. So it's
and a lot of bullying people into getting the vaccinations.
I experienced it in work a bit, and even my own family a bit. Like I said to my sister, I said to her, I'm not vaccinated. I'm not going to. And she confronted me in a way that she'd never confronted me before about anything else ever. It's really strange how much this is affecting so many people's personal lives. This tyranny of culture, which is just no less worrisome than the law of the land and law enforcement. So, yeah.
So would you say that culture there is as divisive as, say, Brexit was, with regard to splitting families along with like vaccine mandates? Would you say it's reached a similar level to Brexit?
That's true. In general, everything is more mad now than Brexit is very timid time now compared to the madness now. Everything is so much more mad now.
And everything I never thought that could be topped, to be honest. That was pretty
crazy. Yeah, that was mad. That was the maddest thing I'd ever experienced in my life up to the point. But now it's just been completely topped. Whether or not now there's more likely to be sort of family disagreement, I think it's less. That specifically is less likely. I think people in the same families tend to agree on things a lot. Relating to COVID and vaccines, but it has been a big sort of social it has been a big sort of source of contention socially and in these domestic environments as well. I don't know, more so than Brexit, I don't know, but yeah,
definitely. It's a lot of pressure and shit. It's like family getting all up in your hair about it, about trying to bully you into getting a vaccine. You should never be bullied into getting a medical procedure, no matter who it is.
I was lucky enough to have a family environment which had essentially no disagreements over Brexit. We all agreed with it. But this COVID stuff has been like a proper source of political contention for us.
Man didn't give a shit about it, so.
Sure. Yeah, it's been strange for me. A bit strange on that front with the family and friends and extended family as well.
Yeah.
It's been very strange.
A lot of my family are social democrats, so a bit more socialist leaning. So anytime I mention the privatising the NHS or changing it in any way, they get all mad and confrontational about it. It's like the golden cow. It's the unofficial religion of the UK, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. I just never, COVID or not, I would just never give any. If I'm in like a gathering of my extended family, and I love them dearly, I do, I really do, and I never would not. But you just know to not have any confrontational opinions on the NHS. It's so weird. It's so ferocious, and
I know it's really.
I've seen a lot of people on the UK's left, complaining about how bad it is, but when the right speaks up. Especially when all the libertarian right speaks up about the NHS, suddenly the left becomes very, very defensive of it.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, you go first.
Yeah, any talk of privatising, even just get private contractors that people get mad about, the current trust where the NHS pays private companies to provide its services. People like our NHS, stop privatising it. It's like, for God's sakes, that is not privatisation. If it gets so ass mad about that, it's like we can't even sort of talk about privatising the NHS in any sort of sensible fashion. It's like I'd settle for the German model just to get something actually useful and actually decent, because the NHS is just terrible. It's just a complete money pit that provides a terrible service that only gets worse. Especially with trans healthcare, it's ridiculous.
Especially with
the same thing over here.
Yeah.
Especially on that note of the NHS using private sector services to do certain things like cleaning or something. You hear all these stories about how, because the NHS doesn't have any sort of innate incentive to economize on what it does, it can just buy the most expensive thing they can find for whatever service it is, like cleaning or getting basic drugs like painkiller drugs or something. They will just get the most expensive thing they can get, and when they're just like rich kids living at their parents' expense or something. It's just
paying like over 50k for diversity and inclusion for people as well. It's like the NHS is underfunded. Yeah, you can afford to try and hire people for 50k for diversity and inclusion. It's ridiculous.
And the executives' salary, like people get paid loads to be executives in the NHS. My God.
I know, it's ridiculous. And people wonder why it swallows more and more money every single year. It's a complete black hole.
That's the same with any real public health system. It's always exactly the same. There's no incentive to to improve, and so they just keep raising the prices of stuff because people can't go anywhere else.
I've just come to because obviously over the years when people have these arguments about benefits of public and private services, I've just come to the conclusion now that there's no point in having any more of these arguments and discussions by making a lot of reference to the empirical data about here's the differences in outcomes between this private and this public, because you're not actually dealing with people who are using empirical evidence to back up their claims in the first place. They're using religious devotion to a cause of public ownership. It is a religious devotion, or the mindset behind it is very much religious, that you're not going to use you can't have a high reliance on the empirical evidence, the empirical arguments to win people over, as it were. You've just got to make a strong positive case on more theoretical grounds. I think that's what more people need to do these days, whether it's healthcare or whatever it is. You've just got to state your case on a more theoretical rather than empirical grounds with loads of numbers, facts and figures and this, that and the other. And so I think it's become quite pointless to say, oh, look at the healthcare, the numbers and figures for Germany or Netherlands and their healthcare systems relative to Britain, which are less publicly funded or less publicly owned. It's something I've come to the conclusion recently, just seeing all the psychological madness that's happened in the UK with COVID, because it's everything has gone so mad.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, worries me how authoritarian our culture's getting, and how accepting of how much the public has accepted this tyranny, and these measures. It's scary, if you know what I mean. It's seeing how compliant people are. It's just it just doesn't inspire confidence and people stand up against this tyranny.
It's hard to know whether or not this is stuff that's come about now, or whether there was some pre-existing sort of shadow of it that was awakened by. It's hard to know. That's sort of the main thing we need to kind of think about and maybe trace it back to see where it might have stemmed from long term. But it's hard, because it would be very strange if this just all came about so suddenly. With no sort of fertile ground.
I think it's been something that's been building up for decades, or maybe centuries. Built for over a century, built slowly building up, and more and more accepting of government tyranny.
The climate change stuff definitely ties in with this, because it's the same. It's the same sort of logic behind it.
And accepting gun control in the 20th century.
Or just all this stuff,
Yeah.
You just start something I was thinking about recently with currency debasement in the 20th century, which has been one of the most destructive things, just for the most widely destructive things on so many different things, whether it's industry or culture, the currency debasement and the Keynesian consensus of the 20th century. And when you're growing up, you know what a unit of currency is, a pound, and then you just know that a pound used to be so much more, like 20 times worth more, that had 20 times more purchasing power than it did years ago. And you just grow up, you don't think there's anything strange about that. You don't think there's anything strange about the fact that a pound used to be able to buy so much more stuff than it used to now. And it's kind of similar to that, the way you just kind of, these things come in and you just accept them, and they become part of your world, and then you just
and it all builds. Now builds up and builds up, and eventually.
The whole specifically the example of inflation and debasement. It's just a thing that everyone accepts as so normal, and of course, inflation is predominantly a government-based thing, particularly a government-based tyranny, and it just relates into lots of things like that. There's this law, and people will just gaslight into, oh, you disagree. What are you? Are you against human progress or whatever? You just need to be very vigilant about this gaslighting and this we just sort of need to be very vigilant for the rest of our lives. It's quite sad, really. I didn't want to do this. I just wanted to live a nice, normal life, but we can't do it.
I don't think I don't think there's not a normal life for me here. So I think I'll be moving to the US.
I don't know. I thought about moving. I did think of various places I might move. I thought about moving to Estonia. Because apparently there are some good things going for Estonia, whether it's their economy or their taxes or just lots of things. And I thought about moving to Switzerland. I thought moving to the US might have been a bit too cliched, but then it also looked tempting. But but at the same time, I don't want to just be seen to be whimsically, leaving Britain, because I still have an affection for Britain, because I've grown up here, and it has like a history, a history to be proud of, except for the 20th century, which is essentially the Dark Ages. But it's tough.
Start of the Dark Age.
Exactly. People shouldn't be so whimsical in thinking, oh, I'm going to move to the US, or move. It's because it should be at least acknowledged that it's sad, that it's so whimsical. It's sad to be whimsically thinking I'm going to move to the US or whatever. It's sad.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I've got a question from the chat about going back to the vaccines and culture around that.
Bit off topic.
So Jack says there was a push for forcing businesses in the US to make their workers vaccinated or kick them out of their job. Is there a voice or a form of this in Britain? So you guys have the culture of, you get the jab or you lose your job.
Sure.
So some companies like Pimlico Plumbing, famously, it's now forcing their workers to be vaccinated or get sacked, and they won't go to any customers who ain't vaccinated, and it's like the government is soon going to be forcing social care workers and NHS workers to take the vaccine or get sacked. Even though we're probably gonna have a tough winter with COVID and flu, the usual sort of winter health problems, which is usually the busiest time for the NHS. But pushing with this authoritarian, idealistic idea of having everyone vaccinated in that sector or lose their jobs, it's ridiculous. They're probably going to be losing thousands of social care workers when we already had a shortage and a shortage of healthcare workers, and social care workers as it is. So it's just going to exacerbate that problem even more than it already was.
Yeah, Pimlico Plumbers, I remember that one too. They're basically this company that's run by a guy who's been in the news a lot because he had lots of anti-Brexit opinions, and he was just interviewed a lot. I don't know, just some guy who has a plumbing business. It's really weird why this plumbing business has been in the news a lot. And they were also one to say, yes, we're going to take on vaccinated people. It's not so widespread that every single person in whatever job they might have has been like forcefully obliged to get a vaccine. I don't think it's so widespread, but for the more characteristic things like care workers or care homes for the elderly and healthcare, that's something that's definitely been in full swing for a while now. But there is also, as I think it's also worth mentioning, as I said before, the whole culture where you can have de facto de jure vaccine mandates, and that thing just kind of lends itself to everything, particularly in workplaces where there's it's very difficult to have a contrary opinion depending on where you are, but it's not so. The actual forceful obligation to get a vaccine for your job is not so widespread. I don't think. I don't have it in my job, and it might get more. It might ramp up a bit in the future. Who's to know? But it's not too widespread for most people, I don't think, yet. No.
Yeah.
But there is something there. Something.
Yeah.
Because I know seeing from upstate New York, they had a lot of healthcare workers quit over the vaccine because they were told take the vaccine or you going to lose your job, so they preempted and they resigned themselves first. And I know even in Australia, I know one of the Aussies that I talked to, his wife, who was a nurse for 6-7 years, has been forced out of her job because she didn't take the jab. Or that's more mandated there is because of healthcare. But just in general, there seems to be a culture of, healthcare is so understaffed. We need every nurse and doctor we can, but if you don't take the jab, you've lost your job. Seems to be a bit of hypocrisy on that front. If they're complaining about having no staff or not enough staff, and then they go and start, basically forcing people to resign if they don't take the vaccine. It seems to me to be quite hypocritical almost on vaccines.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed.
Yeah, I think it's less likely in Britain with the healthcare system we have, or it's less likely that you'd get these dissident people who would resign their jobs in healthcare over vaccines, because generally there's this sort of cultural, religious phenomenon surrounding this single body of healthcare, the NHS, which is slightly different in America, and probably a little bit different in Australia, but similar, but a bit. But I think there's a bit less likely to be these dissidents in healthcare who would resign over a vaccine mandate. But there have been a few, I think. But
there've been a few. Yeah,
I think it's a bit less likely over here than in America, because there's just generally a much greater degree of compliance with loads of stuff in England compared to other places. Yeah, it's been quite annoying.
Yeah. America seems to have more of a like my rights kind of approach to it, with regard to even healthcare workers.
Yeah, it's funny, America, because you could say the same both ways. You could say America is far more likely to be this place with skepticism, authority, but there's obviously been the most hysterical instances of compliance and cheering on for this from America. So America is more likely to be this world of extremes, or a greater variety of reactions, as opposed to just one way or the other. I mean, it's true that there's been a greater magnitude of healthier skepticism of this in the United States than other places, but that has definitely been mirrored by so much more hysterical compliance for wearing masks, getting the vaccine. They get all these pop stars and celebrities to get all the kids to wear their masks, and get all the there was James Corden and Ariana Grande. They sang a song to get the vaccine. Oh, something fucking awful. There's America. Both of these sides of the debate on COVID stuff, they're much more bigger in their scope, but they mirror each other quite well. So yeah, there is the most pro COVID policy lockdown hysteria in the US, but obviously a greater degree of sort of healthy skepticism than certainly in the UK or in Australia. Yeah.
Definitely.
Now I want to go back a bit in time, just to the end of last year. We heard in Australia a lot about you guys having really, really strong lockdowns because you had an outbreak like we've got right now. So can you walk me through that and how that was handled compared to how it's handled where we are now in September of 2021? Like, how is it different back looking, say, October, November, December of 2020 compared to 2021? Was there much of a difference, or how did that work out?
It started with the November lockdown. It kind of ramped up during like October, November time. The cases were going up and up and up, and as well as the deaths. And then we had a November lockdown, which was basically just it was basically a full lockdown, but with education open. And then at the start of December, it got lifted, and we went back into stricter tiers. Then we went into lockdown wave. And then the cases spiked up and up and up again, and as well as the deaths. And then a new tier 4 was added to the previous 3 tiers, which was basically a November lockdown. The November lockdown, basically. And then we got to a few days after Christmas Day, and then I thought, when the case was spiking hard across the country, we went into full lockdown until April 12th, and outdoor dining and some other freedoms got restored, and then we had that for a month until like mid-May, when indoor dining and I think some other freedoms got restored, and capacity was allowed to be expanded, and then in June, I believe, we got the vaccine, the mask mandates and social distancing got abolished, got lifted, which is what we're currently having now. But they were going to introduce vaccine passports. They were talking about it, and it's only recently been scrapped. Well, for now, we'll play on the game brought back eventually because I can already see him in the background preparing for it, linking up with the EU's COVID vaccine passport systems, and get it's and preparing the NHS app, mobile app to have vaccine passports and get. I can already see the build up to vaccine passports coming when the winter surge comes, which I think if it gets bad enough, they'll do a national lockdown. Even though we have such a high vaccination rate here, it won't make a difference. They kept on saying if you get vaccinated, we won't have to lockdown anymore. But obviously that was complete bullshit. Like most things, this government says, and it's just shit. Honestly,
the lockdown we had in November through to started December. In the one that's this one that started in November and carried on. That was definitely a lot more hard hitting, a lot more firm handed than the first lockdown we had. It was definitely more full on, and January was the kind of peak of that. It was really, really ferocious and very, very restrictive. Like all center of towns, they're all just ghost towns, and there was nothing to do. January was a particularly bad time for all this. That was a big point for me where I was sort of breaking down, crying a little bit at home, thinking of how January of 21, that was a bad time. And it was true that we'd had an increase in cases around the flu season, around the winter months, and that those cases dissipated in the months after the first months of 2021. And but loads of other countries had a similar thing where they had a spike in an uptick in cases from November to December, and then it dissipated over January, February, March. Because the way viruses work, they work with seasonality, and there was like all these countries, whether or not they'd had many vaccinations at the time, were also doing this pattern of having decreasing case numbers in January, February, March, with following an increase in November, December. But all pre-existing notions of how epidemics work, or the notion of epidemics becoming epidemic in a country, just completely out of the window, and everything is just completely whimsical, the way we go about the policy and everything. And it's just been so terrible to be in the center of it all. It's been very shit.
Now, when you guys said you had lockdown tier 4, was that? So are those 4 tiers that you have? Are they England or are they UK?
That was England, but it was limited to England. But Scotland and Wales had very similar ones.
Yeah, I think Sorry,
no, you go.
I think Scotland and Wales had the central governments of Scotland and Wales would have had their say on which tiers, but England was the main place for the tier system. And of course, it was just a load of crap. It was just the government wanting to be seen to be doing something sophisticated, or wanting to be seen to be giving, wanting to not treat everyone the same, or treat people that were less less at risk, give them less a heavy hand with lockdowns. But I mean, of course, it's all just a load of crap because central governments can't do effective central diktats of the intricacies of everyday life, especially regarding to infectious diseases, because that's just not the way. It just doesn't work. It just never has worked, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just it's very mad.
Well, I think that comes from Hayek, who said that when it comes to the economy, the government can't control everything because the government doesn't have no one person can have that much knowledge about the economy to manage it entirely. And I guess that you can apply the same thing to managing COVID related mandates, because they tend to take general approaches, even though you need a more, at the very least, you need a more nuanced approach.
That's exactly what I was.
You need to take a more nuanced approach from place to place.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was just finishing off. I was saying I was thinking, this relates to the knowledge problem of economics, and it applies to anything else. The local knowledge of what the COVID situation is. The people in that actual localized environment will know better than anybody else. Certainly, know better than people in central government, and it applies just as much here to the dispersion of economic knowledge. Definitely, yes, definitely true.
Yeah.
So in Australia, what we've had the national cabinet, which is all the state premiers and also the prime minister. So do you guys have something similar to that with all your leaders of all the Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and England? Do they all come together and work together, or is it more separately done? When it comes to COVID restrictions, are they done is it all done with one? Is it all done in the context of them? They having regular discussions about the situation, or do they do it more independently?
Yeah, they do have Cobra meetings, cross cabinet meetings with the leaders of the devolved nations, and they do try to coordinate stuff as much as possible. But a lot of the time, Scotland and Wales do it more strictly and do it stricter, or do the wrong thing because they believe that the central government isn't strict enough, and then we've also got local councils and mayors to factor in, putting in being stricter and enforcing lockdowns and COVID measures than the central government recommends, which I've lost my train of thought.
That's all good. So when you say devolved states, do they or countries, do they have more autonomy now, or is it more like a state system?
It's a very recent thing. It's Tony Blair, something brought in by Tony Blair. So it's not something that can be considered similar to the kind of federal model in Australia. I mean, is Australia officially a federation technically? Or?
Yes, so we're a Commonwealth. So we've got the federal government, which is the Commonwealth government, and then states. A bit like America, except we've got the Governor General as well, who's there for the Queen. Sure.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same as the states in America. It's not officially a federation. It's still the United Kingdom is still officially a unitary system with a lot of central diktats about all sorts of things, and a lot of it will be on COVID. And just generally, considering that these soft devolution policies are just 20 years old, not very old at all, it's not going to be so likely that there'll be the meeting of mind, the meeting of the first ministers, as they're known, of the constituent countries of the UK, that would have much significance, that they'd sort of meet and get together, because it's a bit sort of fake. It's a very recent phenomenon. It's not very legitimate. It's a bit sort of ceremonial and a bit sort of grandeur, and it's not quite the same as a federation like the way that it is in Australia, or certainly not in America. It's a little bit sort of fake, a little bit.
Yeah.
So they do have COVID power, though, right? When it comes to COVID and passing restrictions, or to what extent can they do restrictions? To what extent is it at that level, or to what extent is it more a UK thing when it comes to COVID restrictions in general? Not just, I know you said that you've got the tiers which are done in each devolved country, but when it comes to everything else, is that more federal? Or, no, is that more UK, or is it more a devolved level as well for those ones?
Smart. Kind of. I think the central government did give them more, give them extra emergency powers to manage their own COVID measures, but they do try to coordinate it somewhat, and they do have a lot of control over their COVID measures. But under the condition that they try to that they don't that they try and keep it coordinated, somewhat coordinated, and not let the NHS get overwhelmed or let the cases spike or anything like that. If you know what I mean, they got to keep it under control. Otherwise, those powers can be overridden or taken away from them. They do have a lot of discretion. The devolved governments do have a lot of discretion on how they do their COVID measures, but they need to coordinate that with the central government. It's pretty. Yeah, they got a lot more autonomy on that than I would have thought they would have been given.
So just on that,
I was just say, I think there's been a lot of coincidental overlap in policies in each constituent country. I don't know if they definitely would have had the theoretical ability to just, completely distinct COVID policies, completely independent, completely have the ability to write their own blank slate as to what the COVID policy is. But whether or not they did, the outcomes have been that a lot of it is there's a lot of overlap, a lot of commonality, but just with slight sort of residual differences on this, whether it's, in Wales having that thing with supermarkets where they're covering up certain shelves of luxury items that are not good, or in Scotland they've just gone a bit above and beyond what the intersection of policy is for all of the constituent countries. But I don't know for sure what actual allowances, independent decision making they have, but the outcomes have been, there's just been a lot of overlap, a lot of consistency, I think, just with slight differences.
Yeah. Definitely.
Now we're almost at the 1 hour mark. I do have one last question for you guys though from the chat from Jack, and he asks, do you guys think Wales and Scotland are moving more towards a more decentralized system with greater autonomy like the US, or is it more of a unitary state kind of thinking?
Do you want to go first on this?
No, you can go first. Fine.
No. Short answer, no. If Scotland was independent, they themselves would be very much wanting to keep the whole of Scotland to themselves, the central government. And for example, there are two islands off the north of Scotland called Orkney and Shetland, or two archipelagos. And Shetland recently said how they were quite fed up with the stuff that SNP was doing to them, that they would like to declare independence from Scotland if they could. Shetland also is in a bit of a key position because they have oil revenue and they have tourism revenue as well, because lots of cruise ships apparently pass through Shetland sometimes. And so that is a thing that has happened recently. There's been some contention over Shetland being dissatisfied with, with the central government of Scotland if Scotland was to genuinely become independent. And there are other reasons why it would be sort of more legitimate for Shetland to declare independence, because Shetland has more Nordic roots in it than British. I mean, Orkney and Shetland were originally part of Norway some years ago, and they were given to Scotland as a wedding present or a dowry in like a royal wedding or something. But yeah, that is an interesting case study of Shetland being independent from Scotland if Scotland was to be independent. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the SNP would have none of that, because they like, the oil and tourism revenue from Shetland, and they just generally have shown themselves to be very, very greedy when it comes to governing things. So I don't think the Scottish independence is not something to be celebrated so much by just for its own sake, because it's, you know, a secessionist thing, because it itself is not likely to want to go any further with any part of Scotland that might itself want to be more autonomously governing. So you got to be careful with just having positive outlooks on Scottish independence for its own sake.
Yeah. It's like Scotland's already a tyrannical hellhole as it is. Imagine what they would do if they didn't have Westminster to hold them back and stop them from, and they have full powers to engage in more greater and greater tyranny. It get much worse than it is now. It's just not worth it. If you know, it's just sad.
The outcomes of it would not be good.
It would also probably end up with Scotland trying to get into the EU, but they'd probably fail. And
yeah, that's another thing. Like they want to join the EU after they're being independent. So that's the, you know, the secessionist spirit of political autonomy that we're dealing with here. Independent from Westminster. Oh, we're going to join the EU again. Like this is not something to be celebrated so much for it, just because it's some supposedly secessionist, you know, movement that wants more self-determination. Nah, it's just a load of, it's very well disguised.
Yeah.
All right, so we have hit the 1 hour mark. Is there anything that you guys want to plug before we finish up?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lady Alice _ capital L capital A, and I haven't got really other plugs. What about you, iDupe?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, inDUPEitably, inDUPEitably. And one thing I will also plug is there was this book written called A State of Fear: How the UK Government Weaponized Fear During the COVID-19 Pandemic, by Laura Dodsworth. And it's a book I read recently, and it's, if anybody is interested in stuff that's happened in the UK with COVID, and it also talks about lots of other things relating to, you know, what governments do to get compliance out of populations, and, you know, it mentions things like the book Crisis and Leviathan, or things about manufactured consent. I'd recommend this book to everyone who's interested in it. It's called A State of Fear by Laura Dodsworth, and yeah, I just thought I'd plug that as well. It's a very important book, quite a good book. Yeah,
well, in that case, I think we'll finish up. Then we've got we'll have our next live stream on the protests in about 5 minutes time. So just give us a second to close this one down, get the next one going, and we'll be back with that one then with some more Aussies.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us, man.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. Thank you.